Hello. Let us wait for a few more people to join us. Hope you all are having a good weekend so far. Hello, Iswa Mohan. Thank you for joining. Hello, Saira. Hello, Pachyderm. Thank you all for joining. I hope your weekend is going well so far. Today we are having another episode of the author collaborative segment, and I'm very excited to talk to today's guest because his book, Hate in the Time of COVID, is actually one of those books which I really enjoyed reading in the past year, and I in fact listed it in my best reads of 2021. And it's a short story, but it is very impactful, and it talks about an issue which I think is a burning question, and which I believe needs a solution somewhere. And I'm really excited to speak to him and understand his creative process, and uh, just get to know him better. So without further ado, let's invite him to the live now. Yes, he's already here. Let's wait for him to join the session. Hey, hi Sharath.
Hey, hi Manali, and yeah, hi
Yes,
to
hi. We have quite a lot of people. Thank you all for joining us. It's very exciting, when on a Saturday people join us, taking time out of their free weekend, free family time. So Sharath, before I begin to, sing praises about your book, which I have already done, I want you to introduce yourself to the audience who have joined us today.
sure. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Sharath C. George. I work in market research. That's my day job. But the reason I'm here today is probably because of my side passions, which is primarily writing. But I also co-host a podcast and do a bit of photography on the side. So I write short stories. I have a novel in the works, but not finished. But I mostly write stories either set in India or is relevant to contemporary life in India in some way. Either because it is covering recent events, or speculative or allegorical tales, which are exploring certain themes in our society right now. Yeah, so that's me. I live in Bangalore. I'm originally from Kerala. I've been here for 10 years, and I'm married. So I live with my wife and my 1-year-old daughter. And yeah, like, staying at home all the time, like everybody else now. Good to
Okay,
live
yeah.
here.
Yes, so when I read the book, I was, very it's a very strong text, and it talks about an issue, as I was mentioning earlier. It talks about an issue which needs to be, taken into consideration. It needs a dialogue in the society. I don't know whether we can find a solution, but definitely it needs to be talked about more often. So tell me, the story, it touches upon women's related issues and domestic abuse without giving out any more spoilers, but I have to talk about it because it's a text that needs attention. So as an author, how important do you feel it is to write such stories?
Yeah, so this was not the kind of story I thought I would write, honestly, because one, it's primarily focusing on a woman as a protagonist, which I've not written before, and I think that that itself was a little difficult.
Hmm.
And I think it's very important to explore these kind of issues because there are certain things that are invisible, and I think stories have a way of kind of helping you see the truth more than even sometimes, like a news article or a real life account, because at the end of the day you're not going to hear real life accounts from everybody, and even if you do, those are probably the people who break through the clutter. And and I think there's a lot of issues that are all around us which nobody really notice, and what I focused on in this story is urban patriarchy, and especially during the COVID lockdowns, because something that I noticed during the lockdowns was that there was such a difference in reactions from people based
Hmm.
on how privileged they are or not, and then of course whether you're a man or a woman, right? because I would see a lot of people in, say, apartment societies like my own, where it's a lockdown and say deliveries can't come to your doorstep. You can't have, you have all kinds of restrictions, and a lot of the men don't mind, and they even seem eager to, sort of embrace it. But you can also see that it seems like the women don't really have a voice, and I wonder, like, how many people are stuck or trapped in maybe an abusive relationship, or trapped at home, whereas earlier they could go out, right? So, and these are things that nobody talks about, because especially in urban India or in cities, we all like to pretend that every family is a happy family, right? And maybe they are, but maybe they're not. And if you're stuck at home for months, I think there's a lot of tragedies that go unrecorded, and that's what I wanted to cover. I just wanted to sort of shine a light on something which I guessed would be happening or knew would be happening, although I don't know it personally.
Yes. So while reading the book, I had this, feeling that, people pretend to be progressive, but underneath it all, we are all narrow-minded and we are, slaves of patriarchy. And I could not help but draw a parallel between your book and another series that I recently watched. I don't know whether you've seen it. It's Criminal Justice, the season two. And have you seen the series?
No, I'm not. I
You should.
made before this, which maybe was a bit of an inspiration. But yeah, I've not seen this. Yeah.
So the season two of that series, it also talks about a similar topic and how people seem to be so good and well respected in their field of work and outside in the society, but when at home they are beast and they behave so badly with the women in their lives. Anyway, so that's the parallel I was able to draw when I read the book and then I watched the series. So it was like, wow, we need to talk about such stories more. And as you rightly said that people don't talk about it, and sometimes people are not even aware about it. So that's a good point that you have brought up. My next question is, you were also mentioning that you have a full time job, you are a podcaster, and you also do photography. So how do you manage these creative roles like writing, photography, podcasting, and do you think they intersperse and help in your creative process?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, how do I manage all of them? I don't think I manage it that well. If so, I would. I've not done photography in a while, and especially now that I have a 1 year old, like time is very difficult to get. But yeah, I mean, I think if it wasn't for like the amount of time that raising a child would take, I think I would still have managed it, because it is fulfilling, like and we have saved time from the commute and everything, and that's time that I can use for all of these things. So I try. I think for writing, at least, one of the big reasons why I'm able to do it regularly is because I'm part of a writing group, like a bunch of friends who are also writers, and it kind of reminds you to get back to it. Podcast, luckily, I have a co-host. We are late for our next episode, but in general, like because there are two people, it helps. Photography, on the other hand, I've suffered a little because I'm mostly stuck at home, and I know there are ways to do photography at home, but I've not really done it. Yeah, so that's about managing it. And on the second question, I mean, yes, I didn't really think that I will do these three things and it'll help, each creative pursuit or my job or anything. I think in general, if you have wider interests, I think there are more things to pull from, and like, things that you might not think of, but there are ideas that you get, or things like that, which do help in every sphere of life. When it comes to these three, I can tell you like how it helps. Like, say, podcasting, for example. Like, our podcast is dedicated to busting fake news and fake narratives in India. So we have great conversations about a current event or something that is happening, right? And like, say, for example, we did one on media trials. Like, you see the, like, media will basically be judge, jury, executioner, and that was an episode we did. And after that, I started wanting to write a short story about like, maybe a media trial in a different way, like maybe set in the future or something like that. And I've not completed it, but yeah, that's how the podcast helps, like, because we'll talk about very relevant issues, which then inspires me to maybe write a story, touching upon one or two of those. Then when it comes to writing and photography, there's not as much of a link, except that I guess photography in a way is like, if you do it right, you capture a moment for posterity, right? Like you capture something, and it's a single moment, but sometimes you capture somebody's smile, or maybe you click a bird that maybe won't be there next year or something like that, right? And uh, so in a way, there is a story behind every picture, but you can only wonder at it, right?
Yeah.
And writing sometimes helps you sort of flesh out that picture, or maybe imagine a story behind that picture. So yeah, I mean, that's something I thought of after I started doing it, not that I did it so that this will happen or something like that.
Okay. So I have to ask this. When you were answering, I had this thought in my mind. So the story for this book, was it inspired by a podcast?
Uh, no, not this one. So actually, the the inspiration for the story will seem a little funny, although the story itself is intense and dark. So in my writing group, we had a book club running, and we did Love in the Time of Cholera. So we all
Uh,
read that book, and at the end of it, I just cracked the joke saying that I think I'll write hate in the time of COVID because there's so much of bigotry going around. And then one of my friends said, like, that's a great idea. You should write it, or maybe we should write multiple stories on that theme. So that's how it started. And then I did have like some of these thoughts in my head about, like, say, domestic abuse, and I read it in the paper and wondered what would be happening, in so many houses around you, which you don't realize. And but the idea itself came from that Love in the Time of Cholera, and then that joke about hate in the time of COVID, which ended up being the title. So yeah, that's the inspiration.
okay. Yeah, I when I read the title, the first thing that came to my mind was obviously that book title, which is so popular, and I was like, okay, this seems interesting. Probably that was also a factor why I picked up the book.
Yeah, and in the story they make a reference about a book club. So my
Yes.
friends were like very meta, like we were really, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question is, tell us about your experience with publishing this book. I mean, would you recommend self-publishing to the new authors out there? How was your experience with that?
Yeah, so this is the first time I've done it. I've not really tried to get traditionally published. I've not written as many stories. So I just did it because I thought, like, okay, I didn't know how to go about traditional publishing probably, and that was more homework. And I put it off for a while, thinking that it is more complicated. And I was like, okay, if I have to publish on Kindle, I figured there are more things to do. But then when I finally sat down and did it, it was surprisingly easy. Like,
It's
as long,
very simple, yeah. Not
yeah,
many people are aware about it and skeptical about it, but this is just to send it out to everyone that publishing on Amazon is pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it.
yeah, exactly. The interface is great. Like, they basically thought about all the issues that you would probably
Hmm.
have, like, while doing that process. Like, there is a Kindle Create app which formatted everything.
Right.
There was a cover designer. I mean, although my cover is not great, but you could still get a cover, And if there is somebody who can do like artwork for your cover, that's also pretty straightforward. So yeah, I mean, I think I put it off at least for a month or two, thinking that I'll have to do a lot of work. But then when I sat down to do it, it took me like maybe half a day. But even that was because I spotted some error or the other in my own manuscript, which I corrected. But yeah, it was, so my experience was great. And yeah, I mean, whether I would recommend it to new writers, I would say definitely. I mean, I know it's like a big debate between traditional publishing and self-publishing, but I think if you're just starting off, I don't think you have anything to lose, right? And it's good to put something out there and then see reactions, right? Even if it's like a couple of people, like that's a couple of people who wouldn't read that story or think about
Hmm.
these things if you had just like put it off and kept trying for a traditional publisher. So not to say that traditional publishing is not valuable. I'm probably not the right person to give advice on that. But yeah, like if you're a new writer and you have a story which is collecting dust, please do just log into Amazon and self-publish it.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, because I have been telling many people around me who are into, the creative writing process, and I keep telling them, but probably they think because I'm an established author, it's easy for me. But coming from you, I hope people understand, that it's pretty simple and definitely something to be explored. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have already mentioned for about the inspiration for this story, but I want to know, how do you get the inspiration for your other stories? I mean, and how important do you think it is to draw motivation from real life events?
Yeah, it's a big question in a way because it's something I've also thought about. I think I wouldn't say that, inspiration from real life events is the only way to write it. Like, say, for example, if you're writing science fiction, you might not be writing about anything that anybody has seen. But I would say, even then, if not inspired by real life events, it at least has to be relevant to real life today. Because a good science fiction story, a lot of people think that a good science fiction story is explores science. Yes, it does, but the purpose of it is to, it's almost like an experiment. You take human beings, which are the constant, and then you take, like, say, 10 variables, which could be technology or transportation, all of that. You change a couple of things and see what happens. Like, how does society change? How do people behave? Like, if all communications break down, like, how do people react to each other, right? So I would say it is still relevant, and you would be interested only if it is relevant to real life. So, however you can do that, whether you take like a real life inspiration or a news article and then turn it into a story, then it is automatically relevant, I would say. Or if you're speculating, I think, it should have some relevance to real life. Now, of course, there are, like, type books which maybe don't follow any of these. Like, Douglas Adams is one of my favorite authors, and he just has fun. But I would say even that is relevant because he takes the big questions in life and just cracks jokes about it, like, which kind of helps you take it less seriously. So, yeah, I think a good book is always relevant to real life.
Okay, yeah. And my last question to you is, how should one go about writing fiction that deals with trauma or, abuse?
Yeah, again, a big question because that is something I thought about a lot while writing this story. And, in my writing circle, this is something we have discussed about when critiquing each other's stories. Like, if somebody's written a story about rape, like, people give comments on how you should treat it and how you should not. And that made me also think about, how I would portray abuse or trauma of some kind. And in this story, I mean, not to go into more detail, but I both covered it and did not cover it in more detail, like, or more graphic detail. And the reason was that I thought it might be insensitive. Now, I personally don't know what it feels like. I'm not that. But I don't think that means you can't write about it. I think it's important that you can empathize with somebody who goes through it. But I think you just shouldn't try to pretend that you know exactly what is happening, right? So I took a third person narrative. I stopped at a point where I felt comfortable, covering it. I think if I went further, I don't think I would have done a good job. So, yeah, I think if you're portraying trauma or abuse, like, just be sensitive about what you can and cannot know, and also don't use it as a prop or a, just as a plot point, like, just for the sake of it, which you see all the time, right? Like, you'll see a movie where it's like a formula that somebody goes through this and then tomorrow they're a hero or a heroine, right? Like, I don't think we should do that. I think that trivializes it. Yeah, so yeah, that's about it. Like, just be sensitive and think of why you're including that in your story.
Correct. Yes, that's great advice. Thank you, Sharath. I mean, being sensitive, and I think getting a third person perspective is also what matters, because there's a high chance that we have not gone through the trauma that we are writing about. So it's definitely better to have a fresh eyes, look at it, and get an opinion of somebody who is not biased towards that.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharath. So now I leave the floor open to you if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have a lot. you know, like, you asked me about self-publishing, and you've done like, a lot more than I have done, right? So I definitely have a lot of questions. I'll probably limit it a little so that we don't do this for hours and hours. But
Okay, one question that popped into my head before you jump into your questions for me, when you were mentioning the reading club, we want to know more about that. I want to know more about that. Tell us about that reading club and writing club, and how budding writers can join it, and what kind of suggestions you would give for such support groups.
sure. So the one that I'm part of, there's a group called Write Club Bangalore. So it's there on Meetup. It's basically like, uh, a bunch of people who just meet up, and you don't have to be a writer, like however you define it. Like if you're just interested in it, you can join. And I had found it on meetup.com and joined like almost like say 8-10 years back. And
Oh,
so
wonderful.
we used to meet in MG Road, and it was on the roof of it was on the terrace of a building, which was a company which would just like lend it out to us, and
Oh,
we would meet
okay.
there in the afternoon, and one person would host the session each week, and they would pick some kind of a writing, like it might be, and it's up to that person. They might come with something they want to cover, and like say for example, I did one where I did it about in media res. It's like starting a story right in the middle of it. And then you basically talk about it, and then you have some kind of a writing prompt, and then everybody writes for 1 hour and then reads it out. I mean, you can choose not to if you don't want to read it out, but mostly people read what they wrote in that 1 hour, and then we just discuss it.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
that's the group. I've always found it extremely helpful because one, you talk to other people who are interested in it, and that does like miracles for your creativity. You would think you can't write, and then you just go there and meet these people, and you do write, and then you write in that 1 hour, whereas normally you would put it off. Like, but because you have that 1 hour, you write, and sometimes you write better stuff than which you write over months. So I've always found it helpful. I stopped going because it was too far and it would take me too much commute on a Saturday. But
Hmm.
it is actually on Zoom right now, and anybody can join. And because it's on Zoom, although it is in Bangalore, you can join from anywhere. Like, and now we have people who had left the group earlier because they moved abroad or something, and they're also joining. So it's pretty global now. So it's on meetup.com. Just search for Write Club Bangalore.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, so that's a main group, and then there are splinter groups from there, like so from there I found a group of like-minded people, and we made like a smaller group just to critique each other's stories and read books together and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean that I think has been the single most useful thing for my writing. Like if not for that group, I don't think I would have written the story at all.
Okay. Thank you, Sharath, for sharing that with us. Those of you who are interested, you can join the group from meetup.com. And I think it would be helpful because it has helped Sharath a lot. So I'm sure it will be helpful to other writers, budding writers. Yeah. Thank you, Sharath. So, yes, your turn.
Yeah, so yeah, my first question to you would be, I read one of your books, but I saw that you had written so many, and especially in a short span of time, like whereas it took me so long to just write one. So my biggest question would be that I know creating is hard, like because I've done it. Like it's not easy. I mean, because you have to be in a mode where I think normally I think we're always reacting, right? Like we are reacting to social media, or we are watching news or series, and creating is a different mindset altogether, where you just have to switch into a different gear. And you've done that, like and you've been like pretty prolific in writing like a lot of books, right? So yeah, I just wanted to ask you, like, what drives you to create so much? Like, what is it, difficult or is it easier than it looks? Like, what makes you sort of keep at it?
So for me, Sharan, basically it is the joy of creating. I get a lot of, I think most people get endorphin through workouts. I think I get my endorphin levels up by writing. So that's one of the reasons. It brings me a lot of joy writing stories and, just creating stuff that explores my creative side. So that's one of the biggest motivations. The other is, I think, there are a lot of ideas running in my head, and I just want to see them out into the world, send them out into the world, and let other people also get joy out of those stories. So yes, those
But
are the top two reasons.
but do you find it difficult to say put down that book or turn off the TV and then actually sit and do the hard work of writing something? Or
So when I'm writing, I need my isolation, but the idea germination cannot be stopped. I mean, as a creator, you cannot know that exact moment when you are going to be hit by an idea. So I think the ideation process doesn't need to be isolated, but the creating process, yes. I believe I need isolation, but I know quite a few creators who are very comfortable with working in a chaotic environment also. But for me personally, I think I need isolation.
okay, interesting. Yeah, then another question I had, because I was looking through your profile, and I realized that you were in a corporate job. So I actually, incidentally, I'm in the middle of changing jobs, and yesterday was the last day of my job for 6 years. So
Oh, six.
and yeah, but I'm going to another job. So it's not that I'm taking a break. Some of my friends actually got excited thinking I'm going to take writing as a full-time career. I'm not there yet. But yeah, I think I wasn't sure, but I think that's what you have done, right? Either you have switched completely or mostly to writing from having been in a corporate world. And I was curious to know what that was like, because these are such different worlds, right? Like, one is the corporate world is probably extremely real, right? Like, it's,
Hmm.
you're dealing with the real politic of it, and like all the dynamics of the real world, and all the good, bad, and ugly that comes with it. And then you switch to, like, I would say, like a world where every day you're in your head or in your imagination, rather than being in this, like, sort of corporate world, right? So what was that like, that transition? Like, was it difficult?
So it wasn't difficult for me. I always joke about, my life choices, my career choices. It was a long process of elimination that led me to, the life that I'm leading today in my professional world. Uh, but for me, the transition was not very difficult because I think while I was doing the jobs, I somewhere realized that I'm not meant for this. Though those were wonderful experiences. Whatever jobs I did in my stint in the corporate, they helped me get shaped as a person. And I think a lot of ideas for my writing are drawn from the experiences I had in those years. Having said that, it wasn't difficult for me because I took that decision believing and knowing that this is going to bring me more happiness than working in a 9 to 5 job or in a corporate world. So I think that has been helpful. That clarity of knowing that I will be happier with this choice rather than being in a job. Uh, but I don't think that would be true for anybody else to taking that plunge. It has to be a very well thought out process, and it has to have a lot of clarity that what you are giving up uh, is going not as good as what you are going to achieve in the future or do in the future or in the coming days. So for somebody who is probably thinking of giving up their full-time job and under the impression that working as a creator and working as a freelancer is very lucrative, I think you need to have a certain years of experience in a full-time job before you take that decision.
Mhm. And do you, like, in a job, of course, you have deadlines and like emails coming every day, meetings. So how do you keep yourself accountable, and, like, because in order to produce as much as you have, I'm sure you have worked out a system, right? And my
Yes.
system is deadlines.
So I'm also a freelance writer. So I work for other clients as well. I do ghostwriting and I do editing. So that is of course deadline related, and I coordinate with the clients over emails. It's very exciting to work with them on your projects and get their thought process mingled with my thought process. So yes, that's always there, and it is exciting to work on deadlines. But when I'm creating for myself, I don't put that kind of pressure on myself. Yes, of course, there is a certain discipline and planning that goes into my daily work schedule. But that's how I divide my day, for others and for myself. So I think that that kind of clarity helps.
Yeah, that sounds good actually. For others and myself, maybe I'll I'll try that during the.
Yes,
Yeah, so if I've not asked too many questions, I had a few more.
yes,
Uh,
yes, of course.
yeah, so we spoke about like say the theme that I covered or like all that, right? I was curious to know how do you pick the themes that you write about? Do you consciously pick like say one theme after the other, or do you just whatever comes to mind at that point when you're about to write or something like that?
So this idea of theme, let me be honest, it came to me after writing stories and poetry here and there, and then that's when I realized that there needs to be a uniformity, and in certain, at least when you are putting one in a single book or in a single story, there needs to be uniformity of theme, and that's very important because the reader also gets confused what you are trying to say. So I think I stuck to that in my latest book, Under the Mistletoe and Other Stories, and that has helped me understand that as a writer, you need clarity, but you are writing not for yourself, you are writing for the reader. So you also need to keep the needs of the reader in mind. Uh, so as for the theme, I didn't used to focus on them. Just maybe probably a couple of years ago, but now I do because you're not writing for yourself, you're writing for others also. So that's important. Having said that, I do explore various themes. Uh, for instance, if you see my short stories, they touch upon uh, real life events sometime, but they are fiction, but they are definitely inspired from real life.
Got it. And what's your writing style? I mean, I know there are probably like lots of writing styles, but the two that get talked about are plotters or pantsers, right? Like so, there are people who plot out everything like with an outline and this will happen there, and then write it after they get that right. And then
Hmm.
there are some people who just basically have no idea what they'll write and just sit and write, and the story takes them wherever it takes them. And then there are people in between to various degrees. So which side do you tend towards?
So for my debut novel, Love Triangle, I was definitely a plotter because before I began writing the book, before I began writing the story, I planned out everything. I made a character sketch. I made a sketch of people around the characters. I knew how the character would react in a certain way if I put him in a certain situation, and I think that worked out very well for the character growth and arc that I have shown in the book. But for short stories, I think I'm a pantser. I know the theme, I know the plot of the story, but I let the characters develop as and when I write. But it is also sometimes a mix of both.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm also like a mix. Like probably start with pantsing and then then write some very rough plot and then continue. That's how it might change over time, I guess. Like a lot of people change in their writing
It
style.
also depends on the kind of story that you are writing, I think.
Yeah. Like you mean like the genre or like or the short story versus long form?
That too, and the genre too. I think it's both. For instance, for me, when I was writing the novel, I became a plotter, which I had never done before. And when I came back to short stories after writing Love Triangle, I became a pantser again.
Yeah, yeah, that's something I realized too because short stories you can pants and just like sit in one session and write it. But that's something I also realized when I started writing a novel that you can't do that, right? You have to, I mean, you can't, maybe you can, but it's a lot tougher. Like if you don't have a some kind of a plot.
It always helps to have at least a broader plot line of the shorter things that you're going to put in the story. Uh, in an individual chapter, maybe you can become a pantser, but the broader story has to be clear in your mind.
Yeah. And do you revise it many times or how many drafts do you go through before you finish it?
Uh, so you can never be 100% sure that there might not be an editing mistake or a typo somewhere. So first initial edit has to be by you, but then you also have to involve other people. That's very important. A fresh set of eyes makes all the difference, because you have written it and you have read it multiple times, so it is very possible that you skip that particular typo or grammatical mistake. uh,
Yeah.
for me, Love Triangle, I think I read it at least 4 to 5 times, and still when I read it I realize there might be some mistake. So yeah, it's a never ending process. You can never be satisfied unless you at least do 4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. Like you kind of tend to skip over the parts you have read so many times already, right?
So it's very
Yeah,
important to have somebody else look at it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so then one last question, I guess, like, one of the, I mean, it's been like an interrogation, I guess, but so how do you sort of get into, or do you get into the heads of your characters? And like, because the reason I'm asking is I know that some people do that, say actors do it all the time, right? Actors do method acting where you try to inhabit that character and become that character and not break character. I think writers also do it to some extent, but there are different styles. So do you try to get into your character's shoes and see the world like they do and then write? Or are you more of an observer, like, watching them and knowing them and then, like, how do you sort of get that character right?
Uh, uh, Particularly when I was writing Love Triangle, I think I got into the shoes of the female protagonist, Aisha Banerjee, because a lot of her qualities matched mine, and I think that was easier for me to understand where she was coming from. But it is very difficult to do so when I'm writing a male character, because I don't have any experience. I mean, nobody can. You cannot imagine being the other gender unless you are being observant about it. So yeah, I believe when I'm doing female characters, I step into their shoes. But when I'm doing male characters, I become an observer.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was just thinking about how I did it. Like I kind of felt like the story that I wrote, it felt a little like this person is stuck in my head and I had to tell her story. I'm not sure if I felt like I am her, maybe not, but it is almost like, you thought about it a little and then you had to write it and in a way it was easy because the character is also trapped and like you said, it's not easy to imagine a different gender, but so in a way you're also trapped because you feel out of place and that helped for this story. But yeah, I just asked because that's something I'm still figuring out in terms of how to write.
Yes, and I think having a character outline helps. Imagining and then writing down how that particular character looks like, what are their likes and dislikes, how would they behave in a certain situation, what would they answer if they are faced with certain questions from somebody. So I think that gives us clarity, and I think that will help you as an observer, or while stepping into the shoes of the character also.
Yeah, yeah. So do you do all of this like digitally or do you like write pen and paper, old school?
So sometimes I do it with pen and paper. When I am writing the character traits and physical attributes of the characters, I put it down on pen and paper. But when I'm actually writing, I make an Excel sheet of what that particular character is like, who are their closest friends, and what are the likes and dislikes. I put it down on an Excel sheet, and whenever I'm writing a particular scene involving them, I refer to that, and I know that this particular statement from somebody will have a particular kind of response from that character.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds more organized than the way I do it, but definitely sounds worth a
You
try.
will realize this when you do long form creative writing. I didn't used to do it when I was also only stuck to poetry and short stories. Because there is no scope for much character development and arc in a short story. But in a full length novel, you have to give a lot of space to your character to develop as a person, and you have to justify their actions and their dialogues. So that makes sense, having a proper guideline kind of a thing when you are writing about that character.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorry. I think that's all the big questions I had for now. I might ask you questions later
No
offline, but
problem at all. I think the discussion has become too, intense at this point, and we need something fun, some fun element. So I'm going to start with the rapid fire round. Are you ready?
yeah, yeah, sure.
You you look so nervous while saying that.
Yeah, because I had like a farewell party virtually like this last weekend. They did a rapid fire there also, so I was just like,
Oh, I, I'm- I don't know much about your personal life, so don't worry. I won't barge you with questions that are related to, your antiques in your personal life. I will keep them limited to books and reading.
yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, so my first question is writing or photography?
Writing because you can do it anywhere, and the weather doesn't matter, equipment
Uh,
doesn't, I guess. All you need is a pen. Worst case.
Smart choice. Favorite travel destination and why?
I don't know favorite. It's not a place I've been to, but it's somewhere I want to go to. Masa Marai in Kenya, where you can go on safaris and like see lions and all up close. It's something I've been very fascinated with, especially because a friend of mine went and shared some fantastic pictures. But I really wanted to go because I'm a little obsessed with anthropology and because human beings evolved in Africa. I mean, I know it's not exactly the same, but I always feel like that's closer to our origin. And when I see the pictures, that's like a place I want to go. I'm just wondering when to go with COVID, and now that I have a small daughter and things like that. But yeah, that's the top destination.
Okay. Okay. And here is a fun question. One predictable and one unusual thing you do every day.
Okay, predictable. I guess I drink a lot of coffee. I think anybody who's a new parent has to. If they do it, otherwise they do it. I was actually just having one just before this also, and so yeah, that's a predictable thing. Unpredictable. Uh, I don't know. I read a lot. I mean, read as in I'm like an information junkie. So I like people have social media addiction. I have more of a addiction to like apps which give you like the latest articles on stuff like. So there was an app called Flipboard where you keep flipping through and you read like science articles and all, whatever you've subscribed to. And I had to like kind of stop and cut down because it was driving me crazy and like just looking at the phone all day. So
Oh,
yeah, if it's I guess it is unusual, but I scroll more through that through than through on Instagram, which is why I was a little confused on how to do Insta Live. I don't think I've ever joined Insta Live before. So yeah, I guess
oh,
maybe slightly unusual.
okay. Okay. And a book you feel could have been better written. It doesn't have to be mine because I'm sure you want to say that.
Uh, yeah, this is a tough one because I mean I don't know, like I mean every author brings their own voice, right? So I don't think you should generally try to change it, but if I had to think, I guess Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, because the reason I said that is because it was a book that both kind of inspired me and disturbed me, because there were a lot of things in that book which I really liked, like because after I read it, started appreciating architecture a lot more, and there was the sort of I could understand the passion of building something, and I wondered like when my apartment was delivered, I was like thinking about the people who built it and how they feel that you're actually building something brick by brick, which a lot of people will make their homes for like 50 years or 100 years, right? So there were many things in that book which were like which really sort of gave me that kind of insight and inspiration, but then it also casually glorified selfishness and
Hmm.
rape, things like that, which so it was like a beautiful book which had a little too much of propaganda from the author, and I kind of wish that okay, some of those things were missing so that I can proudly say that it's one of my favorite books, whereas now you feel a little conflicted that yeah, it's a great book, but also
Yes,
glorifies.
completely understand. Okay, and an author you would like to meet in this lifetime.
Does that have to be alive or like
Oh,
from?
interesting. It can be anything. I mean, they might be in the other world already, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I can count people who are no longer with us, it's easy. Douglas Adams, because I think he was a genius. Like he wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's probably the funniest book or book series that I've ever read. And I've read like other stuff that he's written. Everything he's written is like hilarious, and hilarious from somebody who has so much of insight into so many things. And but then he just makes it funny. Like I read a letter he wrote to his editor, and he was angry that they try to change some of the places, like the names of the cities or towns in the American version. And he
Hmm.
was ranting about how Americans shouldn't get disturbed by the fact that places exist outside of America. Or similarly, his editor apparently wanted him to update the latest edition to, say something about a watch, because he had spoken about a digital watch and made fun of it. And they said, okay, let's change that and make it a phone or something. And he insisted that no, I will maintain that, because his logic was that we are always trying to visualize data better, and
Hmm.
say you shouldn't just have numbers, you should visualize it. And he was saying that you have time, which was string of numbers, and we have the best visualization. It was a pie chart on your wrist, which an analog watch is a pie chart, which
Hmm.
you can easily see what time of the day it is. And then you're going back to writing numbers. And he wrote one whole letter about it, which
Oh,
was
wow. Sounds really interesting.
yeah. So he seems like this fantastic guy who's. I always felt he's a genius, and I think his understanding of science and everything is fantastic. But then he doesn't take himself too seriously, and he just has fun with it. So yeah, if I could, I would love to have like a conversation with him, or a beer, better. But nobody is no longer with.
Interesting. Okay, Sharath. So now it's your turn to shoot your rapid fire questions at me.
Okay. Oh. uh, okay. I'll start with an easy one. A book that changed your life.
I don't know whether it changed my life, but it definitely got me into the habit of reading, which is Black Beauty. It was the first book that I've ever read, and I was, I think, 6 or 8 years old then, and I was
You said,
hooked. Black Beauty.
oh, Black. Okay.
Yeah, that was the first book that I ever read, and I have been unstoppable as a reader since then, I believe. So yes,
Yeah.
that changed my book. I love the book and I love the story, but I think it will always remain life changing for me because that's how it all started.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of that book in a long time, but yeah, it did have like a big impact on me when I was a kid, and I was very sad after reading it. And
Yes, I was crying for a week. I mean, oh my God, what happened? And at that tender age of 6 or 8, I mean, I was like, okay, if a simple thing as a book can do this to me, I think need to read more. That's the kind of impact it had on me.
yes, yeah, I should reread it now. Okay, so yeah, rapid fire. I should be quicker, right? Okay, so if you were in a zombie apocalypse, uh,
Interesting.
you have
I
all
will. I think.
characters. Which
Uh, uh, Obviously, I don't want to be a zombie. I want to be on the other side, which is of the survivors. So probably a marine or an army officer who's trying to save all the humans from getting converted.
smart, like you pick the character with the guns.
Yeah.
Okay, then Harry Potter versus Twilight.
Harry Potter, hands down.
Yeah, that is a. You want to
Yeah.
elaborate or?
So Twilight is more like, based on the theme of love, and Harry Potter is something which has multiple genres and it has a lot of character arc of all the characters. And also because it was one of the first books I read. I think after Black Beauty, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was my next read. And again, it was a life changing book for me. that series, I think, changed us as people and changed the way we look at literature, popular literature.
Yeah, yeah, I remember getting the last two, three books on the day of the international release, and once I went in the rain to get it, and I had to read it as soon as it came out, and
Yeah,
yeah,
because there were so many spoilers and you didn't want to know before reading it.
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, thankfully that time we didn't have as much of social media, otherwise it would have been tougher.
No, right? Thank God Harry Potter came out in an era where there was no social media.
Yeah, yeah. Then okay, next question. In Indian authors, what's your first reaction?
Need more exposure, international exposure.
Any? Do you think we have less of it, or we have a huge population?
Yes, we have many talented Indian authors, but I don't think at an international platform or a global platform we are getting as much recognition as UK writers or European writers and American writers.
Yeah, yeah. We can all agree on that, I'm sure. Yeah, then the last one is my favorite, which is probably why I was laughing when you said rapid fire. What offends you?
Oh my God, what offense. So, okay, as a writer, initially when people used to criticize my writing, I used to get offended a lot. That was me. But now I get offended when people praise me wrongly. I mean, I understand that it might not be my best work, so you need to be honest with me. So when people come back and tell me good things about the first or second book that I had written after reading my latest book, I feel that no, you're not being honest. Come on, I know that I have grown as a writer from my first book to my latest book, so you can be honest with me.
Okay. Oh, that's a new one. I've never heard anybody say they get offended by praise. But
Wrong praise.
okay. Yeah,
I know because you are lying. I mean, it as a person, as a writer, as a creator, you know when you have not given your best.
yeah. That, in a way, that's good advice also.
Yeah. So that's about it. Sharath, this was wonderful having a conversation with you. I think we laughed also a lot and we learned also a lot from each other. I hope the people who joined us also had a good time listening to us blabber so much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah,
Sharath, and thank you everyone for joining us on a Saturday, taking out time from your free day. That means a lot to me because I understand the value of free time. And I'm sure you do too. You in fact more understand it better now because you're also a parent.
yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely made me appreciate the value of time a lot more. You know. But yeah, yeah. Not Manali, for doing this, and yeah, thanks to everybody who's joined. This is the first time I've done Insta Live, and I see a lot of names,
You should
including some names I
do it
recognize.
more often. I mean, it's good to put a face to the person that and regular interaction helps build connections. So you should do it more often.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sharath, for joining. And this video will be on my IGTV and on my YouTube channel. So if later anybody who has missed out on the full conversation, they can always have a look at it later also. Thank you so much, Sharath, and thank you everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.